Welcome to Mark My Words, a podcast that not only aims to inspire and teach the listener about entrepreneurship, it also aims to give my guests an opportunity to talk about their unique journey in entrepreneurship and life. So join me and my guests as we meet at the crossroads on Mark My Words. If I told you that I had 9 different businesses and a PhD and did all of this and so much more in the span of 20-ish years or so, and my guests can certainly clarify all of the timelines on this more, but just reading that one line among listening to her YouTube page and reading and everything else that I've done prepping for this episode, I mean, just that one sentence is like, holy moly. And it is my pleasure. I'm not even going to go too much into detail. I will say that Dr. Judy Morley has a cookie shop in Gettysburg, and I moved 2 years too late to pay a visit, but I am coming up to Pennsylvania soon, so maybe we'll take a detour into there. I'll have to tell my wife. But Dr. Judy Morley is my guest today, speaker, coach, change agent, entrepreneur of many, many hats, and an author. She just does so much. Very inspiring. Listen to a lot of her content on her YouTube page. Can't wait to dive in and talk to you today. Welcome to Mark My Words. How you doing?
Thanks, Mark. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
It's certainly my pleasure to have you and to go over all of the stuff, including delicious cookies. We are going to have to try to be, or I'll have to try to be Joe Hollywood and cut to the chase a little bit. And one thing that I always like to start off with, especially in your case, since you have such a long history, you've done so much. I mean, PhD in history, master's degree, consciousness studies, leadership. Uh, what kind of things? I mean, what were you thinking growing up as far as what you wanted to do with your life? Because this is a whole lot of accomplishments that you have. It blows my mind.
I love how you asked that. What were you thinking? And there are days I think that. What was I thinking? Um, I don't know. I think it might have been easier if when I was a little girl, I'd said, when I grow up, I want to be a fill in the blank. And I think that's part of why I've done so much is that I joke that I get bored easily. Um, my very first degree was in advertising. I had a double major in marketing and journalism. I'm sorry, marketing and English. And I went into advertising and I did that for a while. And then I went back to school because I wanted a different lifestyle. And I think, I know you talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, Mark, and I'm sure that a lot of it comes down to lifestyle. Um, I was never cut out for the corporate 9 to 5 lifestyle. So I would dip my toe into it and then it wouldn't work for me and I would go find something that fit a little better. So after I had my first taste of corporate America in an advertising agency in the late 80s and early 90s, that's dating myself. I started when I was 12, of course, but then I went to graduate school and to become a history professor and I thought that would give me the flexibility that I wanted. But anyone who's ever been around academia knows that yes, you get your summers off, but other than that, there is no flexibility. So I think all of my various iterations of what I've done have been chasing that lifestyle of being able to be creative and be myself and be authentic and get paid for it.
And it's interesting that you talk about getting bored easily and feeling like you didn't really fit the corporate lifestyle. And I, for one, feel both of those things, even though I still work in corporate America.
Uh,
But I at least found a situation, I think a career path that at least kind of suits my personality a little bit. And obviously, I'm working from home. It's still a major corporation, but it fits my personality of not being fully like immersed in that corporate environment day after day. It at least gives me that sense of it's my life too. So that was one of the reasons that I started podcasting and looking into starting a business and getting to meet people like you. So I can certainly relate, and that is a motivating thing for me. And when you talk about getting bored, I've had so many jobs. You talk about all the things that you've done as an entrepreneur and just as a person overall, as a professor and speaker, just all over the place. I've had a lot of jobs in general. It's been a lot of searching for who I really am. And maybe we don't ever truly find what that is. But man, I feel like people like you and we sure give it our all to figure that out.
yeah. Well, and I think that, there's that old phrase about there's no there there. I don't know that we never find who we really are. I think we grow and change. So it's who we are now. So what you're doing now is expressing who you are now. And that, 3, 5 years could change and you'll do something different. I think the days are gone where, I know my parents and grandparents' generation, you got a job and you stayed there 40 years and then you retired. And I just don't think that's realistic anymore. I am far from a millennial. And I have a daughter who's a millennial. And even my generation, I don't think it fit them. And certainly by the time you get through Gen X and the millennials and Gen Z, nobody's looking at being one thing forever. And so I think that this entrepreneurial path, or at least this more flexible path, is we are seeing more and more of it.
Oh yeah, and the pandemic played a huge part in that because there is Mark Schmidt before 2020, there's Mark
Yeah,
Schmidt after 2020, and I've been just as a day-to-day corporate professional during the day, I've been working at home since 2021 or working remotely.
yeah,
So there's a huge difference between me before and me after. And it's really when I first started thinking. So I worked at the same company for 10 years. And that in itself, in today's world, is pretty amazing. At least I think so. It's pretty mind blowing. And if it wasn't for the restructuring that company went through, I may very well still be there. So I wasn't
mm,
necessarily looking to leave, but when they offered me such an amazing package, I was like, well, maybe it's time for me to venture out and see the world a little more.
yeah,
And I'll tell you, just that whole time of, okay, I want a little more out of my life than just what I'm doing. And that's when I started learning about creating content, and I started a blog for a while and then got the idea for the podcast and have like a billion other ideas too. And it's just, I think that transition really fed into where I'm at now. And I think meeting people like you and all the others along the way, it made me see that there is absolutely nothing wrong with working a 9 to 5 job, to being in corporate America, the corporate world. But there is definitely a whole other world out there for people like me who, while I've continued working all these years in corporate lifestyle, there's definitely a part of me that's like, I feel like there's just something else. There's another avenue for me, and it really opens up the whole world to you when you start digging in and thinking and seeing and just meeting entrepreneurs and people who are being self-sufficient in that way. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it comes down, one of the things I tell my coaching clients, because one of the things I do is I coach people who want to become entrepreneurs on how to become an entrepreneur. And one of the things I talk about is we all have areas that we're better at and areas we're worse at. And I go to a book by a man named Gay Hendricks called The Big Leap, and he identifies these four zones. And he says, you got your zone of incompetence. Those are the things you should never do. You should pay someone to do them for you because you aren't good at them. Then there's your zone of competence, which are things that you might like to do, but you just aren't fast at, you aren't good at. And then there's the zone of excellence, and that's the problem spot, believe it or not, because in our zone of excellence, we're well paid. We're usually very valued for it. We get praise, we get promotions, we can get a steady job. But the problem is we aren't fulfilled. And I think that for generations, people got stuck in their zone of excellence. And that's kind of where corporate America likes to keep us, is in our zone of excellence. And there's obviously nothing wrong with being excellent if we're passionate about it. But most people in their zone of excellence aren't. They can do it with their eyes closed. They've been doing it for years. They're bored. They're really just in it still for the paycheck or the security or the benefits or the retirement plan or whatever. And they just feel like there's something else out there. And that's when we get to our fourth zone, which is the zone of genius. And when we live in our zone of genius, that's, believe it or not, it's the most frightening. Oh, I'm sorry about the dog. I didn't know she was up here. Sorry
Oh
about
no,
that.
that's okay. My cat comes to visit and meows, and it's all
Okay.
good. Dogs are welcome.
Okay, good. Sorry. I guess she was under my chair and a truck just went by. Anyway, then the zone of genius is where it's hard at first because you don't always see a traditional path. You don't always see the get the 9 to 5, get the steady paycheck, have the benefits in the 401k. And that is frightening for a lot of people, including myself at first. Um, but once you get into that zone of genius and you realize what it is and how filled you are by doing it, then you can do it all day long. You never get tired. You don't care if you have to work weekends because it feels like you're playing. And if you can build a business around that, then you're living your authentic self and you're doing it and you're being well paid for it. And that's where I think, you know, if that's kind of the quest, is to find that zone of genius that is your authentic talent.
And that is a really smart way to put everything. And immediately, that zone of genius, everything you just said, makes me think about what I'm going through currently. So, I'm working tons of overtime at my day job, and I love my day job currently. It's a great job, great team, love the job. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of hours, and I do get bogged down and tired, and it can be a bit repetitive. And today is like my Friday, even though it's Thursday, it's my last day of the week, so it's shift work too, and I just with me moving, I'm in the process of moving right now, and that's come up pretty suddenly. Just so much going on. And I'm
Yeah.
feeling a little bogged down at the end of my week. But as soon as I dial in to do this, it's like I'm totally awake and I'm raring to go. I'm just totally pumped up. And this is not, I make less doing this at this point than I do my day job, like a lot less. So that tells you a lot about just, even though like this is like my baby, this is my project. And even though there are things I'm not getting out of it, there is something I'm very passionate about, and it doesn't take much for that switch to turn on, and I'm just totally awake and inspired, and I totally understand where you're coming from there.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually have a class that's launching next week online called Live Like You're on Vacation, because that's what it's supposed to feel like when you're in your zone of genius. You're supposed to feel that exactly. You just described it perfectly, Mark. That's exactly it. You're energized, you're excited. That's it. That's the deal.
Well, let's talk quickly about times where you weren't on vacation, and just quickly, because there is such a long history here, and I say that almost like it's negative, like it's amazing. I'm obviously very impressed, but just want to talk a bit about, so you became a professor and you were president of, this company, and you were really like doing all this stuff that that people do. Some people become professors and some people get into corporate America, and along the way you decided that you wanted to step into the entrepreneurial world. When was it, and what was it that made you decide that you wanted to shift gears and dip your toes into entrepreneurship?
There were a couple things that happened. I had been somewhat happily, kind of like when you talked about your job. I had a good job, nothing wrong with it, and just there just something in me wanted more. It just felt like there was something more. And so in 1998, I was still a young woman. I had just had a 3-year-old daughter. I was diagnosed with stage 4 lymphoma. And I decided at that point that I kind of, I don't know if people are spiritual or religious or whatever. I'm more spiritual than religious, but I felt like there was some sort of higher power, and I made a bargain with it. And I said, "Get me out of this, and I will do whatever I can to be happy for the rest of my life. I won't live a miserable life. I will be happy, and I will contribute to happiness on the planet if I live." Well, I lived, obviously. And so then I had to start going, okay, so now what makes me happy? Yikes, I don't even know that I know the answer to that question. It was easy to make that promise in a desperate moment, but then when I had to stop and go, what makes me happy? I don't didn't really know. I think most people are like that. We aren't taught to stop and self-reflect like that. What are you good at? What do you like? So it was a combination of that, which I I had cancer and went through my treatment in 1998, but by the time I'm coming around to this realization, it's more like 99 into the year 2000. And right around that time, I also got a divorce because I realized that one of the things that did not make me happy was my marriage. So, as I was getting a divorce and I had to be a single mother of this little girl, I tried doing the corporate America thing where we would get up at the crack of dawn and I'd have to dress her and drop her off at daycare and go to work and work 8 hours and then race home and pick her up and cook dinner and help her with her homework. And it just got to be so much. And, if she had a event at her school, a concert or a parent teacher conference or something, I'd have to take time off work. And I just thought, I I can't work and be a mother. I just can't. It's too restrictive. And that was when I came up with my first entrepreneurial idea. And I already had my PhD in history. I'd been a professor and I was still teaching part time. Um, but I loved the tourism industry. And I was living in Denver, Colorado at the time. And I started a company called Denver History Tours. And I took fourth graders. That's the year in Colorado that you study Colorado history. So I would get contracts with schools and I would take fourth graders on history tours and do it for tourists. And it was great. I could do it on my own time. I did it when my daughter was in school. And during the summer, when she wasn't in school, the poor little thing had to come on tours with me, but she learned a lot about history.
And that really fit right into your niche as far as even your major. A lot of people say they don't really use their major once they leave college. And I'm still thinking about, I saw Jamie Kennedy a few weeks ago, and he talked about that, had a joke about that, and it's been stuck in my head ever since because I know I used my major my whole life, my whole adult life, and I'm still using it just producing this show.
Uh-huh.
So, especially for such a a field that's very narrow, like history, it's amazing to hear that not only you found a way to use it, but also as an entrepreneur, which is really is another thing that says so much about your track record. Just amazing. And I totally agree. You talked a little bit about spirituality. I don't really talk a whole lot about that, but I will say as I get older, I definitely think about that a lot more. And as far as listening to your gut and
Yep.
listening to what is telling you, you said something about that in one of your videos, and I was like, man, she's talking about listening to your gut. I know we're gonna get along if she's talking like that because I think and talk all the time about just listening to your gut and going with your gut, which I make it sound really easy, and you look like you have something to say, so I'm gonna let you say it.
No, I'm agreeing with you. I'm just nodding because I'm agreeing with you. And when you were about to say you make it sound like it's really easy. I mean, it's not. I think that's where you were going with it.
Yeah, that is it's really hard because that's advice that I give people all the time. Just listen to your gut. And yeah, that's easy. It sounds a little bit like a cop out, but it's also very, very true. But you also gotta compete with your brain, your heart, a lot of other things.
Well, and years of conditioning. And, I don't want anybody to, come down on their parents or authority figures because everybody does, whether you have great parents or terrible parents, everybody did the best they could. But our culture, our society, and certainly most people, once they become parents, they don't tell their kids, whatever you're feeling is okay. They tell their kids, oh, that didn't hurt, or you don't have anything to cry about, or you can't ever make a living at that. Just buck up and go get a job, or whatever. And they're well meaning, they do it to protect us. But after a while, we get conditioned to believe that whatever we're feeling isn't valid, or whatever we want to do does not have value, or um, we have to sacrifice what we're good at or who our authentic self is in order to operate in the world. And it just becomes kind of a conditioned thing. That's what's going on in the brain while we're trying to listen to our heart and our gut. We're getting vetoed, by all those years and years and years of conditioning, whether it was from parents or teachers or television or whatever. And so, yeah, going with your gut is not as easy. That's why I said when I had to ask myself, okay, what makes me happy? I was like, I'm 33 years old at this point, and I don't even know what makes me happy. And so it's
You
daunting.
might you might have known, maybe just not like consciously, just this consciously makes me happy. Because if you put me on the spot right now and said, well, what makes you happy? I might say the same thing. Well, heck, I don't know. Pizza? Like, I
Yeah.
mean,
Everybody loves pizza.
yeah,
Yeah.
cookies. Cookies make me
Cookies.
happy.
Cookies.
But
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah, and you talk about conditioning. So one of my cats recently passed away. One of them that you used,
Sorry.
I appreciate that. Oh, it was brutal, but that was one of the rare times in my adult life that I actually just bawled and cried and just absolutely could not control it. But that the reason for that, I feel that I don't really cry because I know it drives my wife a little nuts. She's like, why don't you cry? You never cry. You never show emotion, or at least that type of emotion. And I blame that totally on conditioning because I can remember teachers, my parents, why are you crying? Stop crying.
Yep,
So,
yep. And it's so much worse for boys than girls, but yep.
yeah, it's not exactly cool to be a guy and cry. So, I just had a meeting yesterday where it took me a few weeks to just talking at length about my cat. I had her for 14 years. She lived,
Oh,
I don't know how old she was. She was at least 15, 16. She lived a long time, but I finally told my team at work, I was like, hey, yeah, because I guess some of my teammates were having to take their pets into the vet. I was like,
oh,
yeah, do you remember Ginger? Ginger passed away. I was starting to tear up a little bit. I'm like, no, bad Mark. You don't do that. And that's just all part of that conditioning.
yeah. Well, and you are allowed to do that. You are allowed to cry. We all are. And I think that's, you bring up such a good point about, I know that you just brought up in the context of crying and showing emotion and tearing up, but I think we learn that in everything. We learn things like work is supposed to be hard. So whatever we're good at, what feels like play to us, we shouldn't have a job doing that because that's not really work. That something's bad about that or wrong or lazy. It's back to that conditioning. And I think that's why more people don't become entrepreneurs. I've been very fortunate to be able to find businesses, to create businesses that fit my interests and my skills. After I did the Denver history tours, my next big business, my next big foray into entrepreneurship, I started a marketing firm because I had a degree in marketing, but I only worked with city governments or small towns or real estate developers that were developing in historic districts. And so I helped brand historic districts. Every town's got one. Like I was in Denver, so lower downtown Lodo in Denver, or Soho in, well, that's in New York, but there's also one in Seattle, or these districts that were coming up in the 2005 to 2010 era. And so I was able to do well at that, and I loved it. So it does take, but really getting clear on what you like to do, what do you want to do, what's fun, as well as what do you know something about. I might think it's fun to sew quilts, but nobody's going to want to buy a quilt I sewed. So you gotta have some skill there, right?
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, there are some things that I would love to do. I would love to record music, let's say, but I don't have near enough skill to do that. So, not going to do that. I would
Right.
love to get on a stage or try out for an acting job or whatever. But as much as I love to be funny and play around, I'm not an actor. So,
Yeah,
I'm not going to do that. And
yeah,
that I think kind of plays into what your point is, just not as an entrepreneur, but really just in life. You gotta find what makes you happy, and you gotta be willing to try things, and you also got to be honest with yourself and do what is realistic.
yeah. You're exactly right. And what's realistic, and you got to stretch that realistic a little bit, because again, back to what we've just been talking about. Sometimes we get talked out of what's realistic by people who wanted to protect us. So, you know, maybe it doesn't feel realistic at first, but you really want to try it. Give it a try. What's the worst thing that happens? You fail. Big deal. Failure isn't final and failure isn't fatal. So, try again then.
It's interesting we talk about what's realistic and what's not. When I told one of my parents that I wanted to major in television and film, I think they thought that I wanted to be on camera, go to
Mm,
Hollywood, and be in movies, like be a movie star or TV star. And I'm like, that's not exactly what I'm looking to do because my feeling has always been I just want to be there. So I'm just
Ah,
there, but I have a
yeah.
job and I've always been into all kinds of things to do with technology and media. I used to take black and white TVs apart when I was like 6 years old.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, I love kind of getting in there and ruining them and you know, seeing how they work. But I've always been fascinated with all that kind of stuff. And it took until around 2020 for me just to get up the nerve to say, I'm going to put myself on camera for content. I'm going to have a podcast and actually put my voice out there. So I've changed a lot. But you gotta just listen to your gut. Again, listen to your gut. And what seemed realistic to them, they had good intentions, but I knew better and I knew what path I wanted to take. And I'm glad I listened to my gut because here I am now.
And I like listen to your gut too, because yeah, you know yourself. You're supposed to know yourself better than anybody. And so yeah, yeah, that's great.
So So let's talk a little bit about where some of the other things that you're doing, the offering and speaking engagements, where did all that stuff start to play in? How did you find your way into taking those avenues?
Well, it was kind of accidental. It wasn't what I thought my career path would be. But after I had cancer, five years after I had cancer, my oncologist, I went to my last appointment, the one where, because in cancer circles, once you're cancer free for 5 years, you're done, right? You're clear. And so I went to my last appointment, and my oncologist said to me, he said, "You were the most difficult, annoying patient I had. You wouldn't listen to me. You wanted to go, you were stubborn, you wanted to go your own route." He said, "And yet you are one of my greatest success stories because I only had a 20% chance of survival." So, here I am now, 26 years later. So he asked me, he said, "Would you come up with a coaching something, a class or a workshop, and teach it here at Rocky Mountain Cancer Centers to all my patients about what you did with your mindset and your thoughts to help you survive?" Well, I hadn't been thinking along those lines at all. My whole world was in the business world and entrepreneurship, but I was intrigued and I thought, sure, I would do that. And so I started giving these more motivational classes than anything else. I didn't exactly go through a checklist of things to do if you're diagnosed with cancer. It was more about believing anything's possible and not listening to the negative voices in your head and keeping your thoughts clear and being true to yourself and all this around the idea of how do you get healthy? How do you use the mind body connection to stay healthy? And that then led me down a path where I I ultimately became a spiritual coach and then a minister, a non-denominational minister. Um, I did jump back into the corporate world for a little while to publish a spiritual magazine and work for a spiritual organization as their director of communications. Um, but that's when I got my master's in conscious leadership, and I just thought, people need to hear this. People need to hear that there are so many voices out there that tell you that you can't do it. They need a voice out there that'll tell you that you can. You can. You can do anything you put your mind to, right? And so that's kind of how it took a turn. Like I said, I wasn't planning on it, but once my doctor asked me to do that, and I really fell in love with it, and I felt like I was really contributing something of value to the world. You know, I people who were so scared because they'd been diagnosed with cancer, and they had family situations, they had work situations, they were terrified, just to be able to spend some time with them and say, that's not the truth, you can beat this. And um, that felt really good. So yeah, I went from there to writing. My first book in that I have history books out from when I was a professor, but because you've got to publish or perish when you're in academia. But my first kind of inspirational book, it's still in print. It's got a different title than the original, but it's called Five Spiritual Steps to Overcome Adversity. So it's on Amazon, and that felt really great. And then that's when I went into coaching. And after a while, I shifted from health and wellness coaching to doing more business leadership and entrepreneurial coaching. That was just an evolution in my own thinking. I mean, if someone came to me and wanted health and wellness coaching today, I'd still be happy to do it. It just, you kind of shift a little bit. So yeah, that's how that came about. And then um, as I was doing leadership coaching, as I was doing more leadership coaching, I had the opportunity to bring my history degree back in because I connected on LinkedIn with a wonderful man who owns a private institute here in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania called the Lincoln Leadership Institute. And we met, we got along great. I love his content. It's very much what I have always taught and believed. And he invited me to come join the faculty. And so 6 years ago, I moved from Denver to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And so I get to talk about leadership in the context of the Battle of Gettysburg. So that's really fun.
Yeah, that does sound like fun. That's what you just never know where life is gonna take you. And
Right.
one thing I do want to say is congratulations on overcoming your diagnosis and for holding on so strong for all these years. And even though I can't say that I had that kind of a challenge in my life, I do understand what you're saying as far as feeling like you have something to say and there's like a real purpose behind what you're doing. Because, yeah, this particular podcast is about entrepreneurs and their path, and that meeting people like you really inspired me to do this. But one thing that is inspiring me to put myself out there overall, and I told you before we hit record that I have a lot of goals and things I want to do that I haven't done yet. And one of the things that really inspires me is the fact that I was born with cleft palate and lip, and actually like a syndrome where couple other things are going on. It's all kind of tied in together.
Mhm.
And I feel like I've overcome so much, overcome bullying, whether it was direct bullying or indirect bullying, and just, people being like, I'm not sure about this person. And I could go on and on and on, but just being Mark Schmidt and living that life and having all of those obstacles and challenges and just not being scared and just saying, you know what, I'm going to put myself out there in corporate America. I'm going to take an acting class. I'm going to start a podcast. I'm going to do all these things that maybe conventional wisdom would be like, yeah, don't do that. Just stay behind the scenes and that's where you belong. And, you're not going to make it doing this or that. People are going to judge you. Just letting imposter syndrome get into your head. I kind of just, said the heck with that and listened to my gut and just kept doing what I wanted to do with my life. And I feel like there has to be an audience out there somewhere, whether they've gone through the same things or not, that could maybe be inspired by somebody like me, even if I don't talk about it every episode, which I don't. I really don't talk about it much at all. But I'm just
Yeah.
hoping that just by doing what I'm doing and plugging away, that people will be inspired by that. And that's something that really drives me.
Well, and I think your story will inspire them. I mean, if I were you, I'd share it every chance you can get. Not because it's really not about you. It is about you, but it's also about what your example can give to other people. We don't have enough role models like you, Mark. We need people like you who who say, the heck with the bullies, the heck with all these things that society tells me I can't do. I want to do it and I'm going to do it anyway and succeed at it. And so your story, empowers other people to live their story, whatever it is.
And that's exactly the path that I'm trying to set myself up for and
Uh-huh.
just really put myself in positions to talk about it more and more and more. And I'm evolving, and I'm obviously a lot more comfortable as a host and as a speaker than I might have been 4 years ago. So
Yeah.
it's coming along more and more, and I think about more and more about what else I can do and how else I can get there and put myself out there. So that's an absolute goal, and you're absolutely right. I probably should talk about it a little more. I try not to let it define me, but maybe it's not the end of the world that it does a little bit. But
I would say that's define who you are today, but it definitely was the launching pad that started you on this trajectory.
absolutely. And before I forget, so I am aware and really want to fit in for a minute or two. I know you also try to be a mentor for young women as well, which I'm
Yes.
sure is a part of your path and just what drives you. Talk a little bit about that because I know you have a book or two about that that's
Yes.
kind of like aimed at young women or maybe just women in general.
Well, women who are, coming up in their careers for sure. Yeah, my most recent book is titled, and this is really the title, so pardon my language. It's called Master Conflict Without Being a Bitch. Um, I mean, on the cover, we, use some exclamation marks in there, but everybody's going to read it that way. And it's because I think that women are not really taught how to be firm, how to be direct, how to be strong without because and part of the reason that they don't embrace that is because they're worried about that label of being called a bitch. And I think that's unfortunate, although I've noticed that younger generations are kind of using that word ironically now. They've kind of embraced it and made it their own. I saw a bumper sticker while I was writing the book that said "Namaste, bitches," and I was like, I love that. I want one. um, but yeah, so that yeah, my kind of my ideal client for my coaching is a young woman who, um, and I've worked with several, has a small family, and is where I was at that same point. They want to be able to be home for their kids. They want to be able to be around and have the flexibility to be there for their family, but they still want to be a powerful career woman and use their education and do what they need to do in the world. And so they don't really want to be a stay-at-home mom, but they also don't want to do the corporate 9 to 5. They don't really have any idea how to start into the world of entrepreneurship. And so that's the kind of coaching package that I offer to young women. And I know this wasn't what you meant when you asked the question, but it is as a kind of side, since we'll wrap cookies back in here. Um, I do it with young women who want to be bakers. When I started, so I started I'm sorry, a little over a year ago, the Gettysburg Cookie Company, because I love to bake. It's just a hobby. Never thought that I would actually have a business at it. Don't really like doing the baking that much myself, here and there, but I love the idea of the business, the branding, and I came up with cookie flavors that relate to the Battle of Gettysburg. So if anybody out there, I don't know why they would, but if anybody out there is a crazy Gettysburg person like I am, they know that there were some very important places on the battlefield, like the Peach Orchard or Devil's Den or Little Round Top. So I came up with recipes that would fit those titles. So I have a peach cookie that's called the Peach Orchard, and I have a chocolate chip cookie that's called the Devil's Den, and etc. But I frequently would bring on young women who maybe were still in high school, didn't know if they were going to be able to go to college, wanted to do something with their lives to get out of bad family situations. And I would bring them in and I would have the pastry chef that I work with train them so that they would be able to go into a career that they really loved and maybe even start their own bakeries.
I think that's amazing, and I think what you're doing there for women is amazing. And not that I certainly want to make myself out to be, like the greatest guy on earth, but I definitely try. I try to make this a very like open universe and diverse because entrepreneurship, especially today, is very diverse. I mean, it's open to our technology has just opened us up to the whole world, and there's a lot of people out there that just beyond you know white males who tend to get a lot of like maybe the media or whatever, although I should probably retract that a little bit. I feel like that's changed a lot, but that could be a topic for another time. I feel like women have
It's not
really
changed. It's not changed that fast.
not that fast,
Yeah.
but I definitely just I bought a car recently, or I should say, my wife's car broke down and she had to buy a car. I usually just let her make most of those decisions. Like, she's amazing, but everybody I dealt with to buy that car was a woman. Like, no men were
Mm,
even involved.
that's cool. That's very
So
cool.
I and the thing is, that was probably the best car buying experience I've ever had. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I guess, one of the things I'm trying to promote because I get a lot of inquiries to have women on my show. And I'm like, I really try as much as I can because there's so many amazing women out there doing incredible things, including people like you who just blow my mind. There's one woman in particular who I had on my show a few years ago, very young. She's in her 20s, but she's accomplished more already than I certainly have in my life. And just those stories just blow my mind. That's what I want. I want all kinds of stories, but I love stories like that that really show that this is going on in the world and we need to like acknowledge and give props to it. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. The
I
world
don't
is
really
changing.
know. I don't know where else I'm going with that, but I appreciate you guys. I was actually going to segue into your cookie business, so I appreciate the segue. So I should ask, what's next for you? What's on the agenda now?
Well, what's next is just more of the same. I'm building up the cookie business. Summer Gettysburg's a tourist town, so summer in Gettysburg is when we're busy. So looking forward to that. And then with coaching, as I said, I'm looking forward to doing several. I still speak quite frequently. I speak on intergenerational leadership. I speak on conflict resolution. So I'm doing a lot of that. And like I said, I'm just launching an online class on live like you're on vacation for entrepreneurs. It'll launch next week. So on my social media and my website. So that's it. Just and enjoying my I have two little Scottish terriers. One I can see over my shoulder here on the couch. So enjoying my little puppies.
Any particular way that people can get a hold of you? Just come to your
Yeah.
website.
Yeah, my website, it's drjudymorley.net. Unfortunately, someone bought .com 25 years ago and I can't get
Oh
it.
no.
But yeah, drjudymorley.net. And yeah, there's a hello button that, hello at drjudymorley.net, or they can just email me directly, drjudy at drjudymorley.net. And that'll get them to the coaching stuff. They can also look up the Gettysburg Cookie Company if they want to order cookies. We do ship all over the United States. So if anybody knows anyone
Ooh.
that's like me, a crazy Gettysburg person, you can go online to gettysburgcookieco.com and put an order in and I'll ship.
Well, I know somebody, and I may take you up on that. And there's a chance I don't know how our commute is going to be. I'm sure my wife's going to draw that up, but I'll be driving, but she'll draw out the commute. But if there is a chance, I may even stop in there. So if
Love
not,
to see you.
if not, I will order something and have it shipped to me. And I think that is all the time we have for today. So, Dr.
Wait, Mark, before you close, I want to say one last thing. I want you to take what we talked about today and work on your own TED Talk. I can't wait to see your TED Talk.
I would like to do a TED Talk, and I almost feel a little egotistic even saying, like, I'm going to have a TED Talk. But to your point, it's a realistic goal. You know, I have something to say. So,
Do
hey,
you have a lot to say and to inspire, so I'll be watching for that.
and I have been thinking about it off and on for a few years now. So I will use your words of inspiration as an opportunity to think more seriously about that. But I want to seriously thank Dr. Judy Morley, who has .net, not .com, unfortunately. Just when you think that you're the only Dr. Judy Morley, or you're the only Mark Schmidt, or you have the only Mark My Words, it tells you what a big world it is. So thank you so much, Dr. Judy Morley. I had a blast talking to you. I wish you all the best. Congrats on all your success. You deserve every last bit of it. And I thank you for being on Mark My Words.
Thank you, Mark.
Appreciate it. I'll see you all soon. Bye for now. Thanks again for taking time out of your busy day to listen to Mark My Words. If you would like to connect with me beyond the show, you can find me on LinkedIn at Mark Schmidt, where I will be talking about entrepreneurship, careers, and anything else that is on my mind. You can also connect with me on Twitter and Instagram at Nimrod1979 and Nimrod79 respectively. This podcast also has a page on Instagram at Mark My Words. And finally, if you want to leave me a voicemail or check out what I'm up to with the podcast, come find me at podpage.com/mark-my-words. Thanks again for listening, and I'll be back with a new episode soon. Bye for now.